Hello everybody after a long absence and welcome back to the farm. Some very exciting things have happened over the last few months and I wanted to share them with you. The very first thing is that the gigantic brush pile and all the wood by the side of the road has been removed. I found a great guy named Ken who does amazing work at incredibly competitive prices, and he removed everything with this one awesome skid steer tool. He graded out all of the land in the field, and then he came back with a stump grinder and he removed about 7 of the biggest stumps in key locations, including right in front of the shed, or this small barn to the left hand side of the large barn. There was a few big stumps right in front of it. He removed those, and then we just went right down the side of both barns and we removed all the big stumps alongside the buildings. This was a gigantic step forward, meaning that next season I could plant. So in between a lot of travel and a whole lot of other things that have been going on, I got into this kick about beautifying the front of the barn. So I found these awesome solar barn lights on Amazon, and I bought a bunch of sets. And these things actually have bulbs that you plug in, and they have a battery built in, and they have several solar panels on the top of them, and they just look like a really cool design, especially since I'm actually putting these on a barn. Now throughout this video we're going to talk about several different types of solar lights, and I'm going to provide links to all of these products in the description of this video. So for most of these solar lights, they operate in a few different ways. You can either have them always on, you can have them dusk to dawn, which is what I wanted, or most of them have some sort of motion sensor. So these things were fairly simple. There's a few metal parts, everything just kind of screws together, and then once fully constructed, these things simply screw onto the face of the barn, and as long as the face of the barn gets a few hours of sunlight per day, then these should stay illuminated for several hours after dark. We'll have to see. Assembly of these lights is pretty straightforward and pretty quick. There's a threaded rod on the top of the light, and all you do is screw the hook on until it's very tight and until the solar panels are facing forward. And then there's a neat little thumb screw, and you just insert the extension rod that has the screw plate on it, and once fully inserted, you simply tighten down that thumb screw and you're 99% of the way there. Now, like I said, this particular model comes with a low voltage LED light bulb, one of those Edison light bulbs where you could see the filament inside it. I didn't know that there was an additional bulb that this thing came with, and I was pleasantly surprised because it makes it feel higher quality, it makes it feel substantial, and this bulb, it's actually glass. So you screw it in, and then once it's screwed in, you have a button right next to the motion sensor, and you turn it on, and there you go. This thing is incredibly bright. The GoPro doesn't really do it justice, but it illuminated a lot of the room. And I bought several of these. So the hope is that with all of these installed, you're going to be able to see quite a bit of light and quite a bit of the front of the barn at night. So lining these all up, getting them fully assembled, took about 15 minutes, and they're ready to go. Now, just in case anybody wanted information about this bulb, the bulb comes as part of the kit. It's really a 3-volt bulb, and it's only 6 to 8 lumens, but as you saw, that light was really bright. And it also points out that this light is only for these lime-eyed solar barn lights. Now, another type of light that I bought are these puck lights. I have these all over my house. They're great, super bright, and they illuminate upward. So if you put them alongside the house and aim them upward, it's almost like a wall wash. And these are solar also. Installing the lights was pretty straightforward. I started with the barn lights that I assembled first, and then I took a couple measurements on each side of the door of the shed, or this smaller barn, and what I wanted to do was put one on each side of the door, centered in the side openings. I also wanted to have the lights about 7 feet up, so that they would cast a nice downward glow from an appropriate height. So I grabbed my Harbor Freight little genie ladder clone and I set it up, and actually attaching the lights is really straightforward. I used a couple 1.5-inch screws, and there are 3 screw holes on the screw plate of each of these lights, and once they were screwed in, everything stayed. And the only thing to remember to do is to flick the light switch to dusk to dawn mode, so that not only are they charging, but when dusk hits, they're ready to go. The foundation of this building is a bit of a mess right now because I had those stumps ground, so there's piles of debris. But I grabbed a landscape rake and I basically just started flinging debris and leaves and vines and all of the other stuff that's down there out of the way, because I did want to place the puck lights. Once I had that cleaned up, I moved on to the big barn, and I wanted to place 2 of these barn lights on each side of the main opening of the barn. Installation was exactly the same as on the shed. I also installed these 7 feet up, and I figured the spacing of these and the height would give a very nice street presence to the barn, even though the front of the barn is kind of a disaster. So I kind of joked around that despite the fact that the barn is in shambles, it will look nice for at least 4 to 6 hours every night. As I did with the shed, I also placed puck lights at the very base of the barn at strategic locations so that the barn lights facing down don't interfere with the puck lights facing up. And even with just the simple addition of these lights, it gives the barn and the shed a really cool look. I like them. And just so that you could see what it actually looks like up close, I took a couple close-up shots of the barn lights as well as the placement of the puck lights down below. The puck lights are just sitting there. I'm very realistic about the fact that this area needs to be graded and cleaned and cleared. Same thing with the front of the barn. So they're temporary, they're not screwed in, they're just sitting on the ground. And the front of these buildings gets enough light that they charge and they stay illuminated for at least 6 hours, which was surprising to me. Some nights it's even more. At night, the appearance of the lights is wonderful. Now, the GoPro does not do justice to nighttime videography. These lights are very bright, and it casts a really nice even illumination both downward from the barn lights as well as upward from the puck lights that are sitting on the ground. Similarly, the shed is very nicely illuminated. So instead of these videos, I hope these photos give you a better idea of what these lights actually look like at night. These aren't retouched. This is right out of my cell phone. And these are solar. It gives a very, very nice glow for several hours each night. I did not stop there though. I kept looking for cool solar lights, and I found these very substantial up and down light sconces. These things illuminate both upwards in a fan pattern as well as downwards in a fan pattern. So I installed these on one side of the barn just as a test to see what they look like. I did go around to the other side of the barn, and I have a desire to place some solar lights here as well, but the side of the barn's just a disaster. I got to get these vines off and the remains of that silo, which the vines are holding captive on the left-hand side. And I also have to clean that mess on the right-hand side. But at night, these things also look really cool. Again, the GoPro doesn't capture it fully, but there's a lot of light given off. The problem is, though, two of them just didn't produce enough light. While they are bright, there's just a big gap in the center, so I figured maybe 3 of these per side was the way to go. So the very next day, I went back to the farm and I removed both of these lights and I remeasured where the lights should be so that I could add a 3rd light to the center. And of course, my awesome neighbor Jerry was right there to watch and lend a hand and make sure everything was straight and to carry the tools for me as I moved the ladder around. Now, I'm going to lament here for a second that by the time this video comes out, Jerry has been out of their house and his wife Deb for about a month, and it's a loss. I really miss them. They did stop by a couple times to say hi when they saw me outside, so fortunately they are still in the area. They did not move down to Tennessee, at least not yet, so time will tell. Have I mentioned how much I hate heights? It is killing my soul right now to be up on this ladder and to have to reach over and unscrew things, or to reach up and make sure that the lights are positioned properly. This little Genie clone from Harbor Freight extends about 18 feet, and I guess in the grand scheme of things, 18 feet isn't that bad, but for me, it's panic-inducing. But I got the job done, thanks to Jerry's help for holding the ladder still. And with 3 of these barn lights per side, it creates a much more even glow. Could I have put 4 up here? Would it have looked better? Absolutely. But you gotta draw the line somewhere. But after we did this side, we went to the other side, which was even more sketchy because the concrete that the ladder is sitting on is the rim of a second silo, which drops down about 6 feet right behind Jerry. So if he slipped, or if the ladder slipped, we would have both been going for a ride. But fortunately that didn't happen, and I did get 1 light installed. So at least it's something. It provides just a little bit of ambience to this side of the barn for now until I could get those massive vines down and the silo. So once we made sure we were clear of the GoPro sitting on the ground, we tipped over the ladder, got it wrapped up, and called this project done. No more ladders. That always makes me happy. So there's the 1 single light all the way on the right-hand side. More to come, hopefully. And a few more shots of what the front of the barn looks like at night. It does look very nice. And then as we work our way around to the other side of the barn, you will notice that I do have the 3 lights set up, and it does provide a bit more light, and it is a little bit more enjoyable to look at. Down the road, maybe I'll add a 4th, you never know, but for now, I'm considering the solar project complete-ish, sort of. More to come, a little bit more. We'll see. Time will tell. The next afternoon, Jerry and Deb stopped by the barn as I was dropping stuff off on my big equipment trailer, and I figured this would be a good time to show you some of the things I've done to the equipment trailer, because I did engage in several projects with this trailer over the summer. So you may notice some additions. First of all, I installed these pocket hooks that I found on Amazon. They just clip in under the bottom of the pocket and they hold a few thousand pounds. I put 4 of them, 1 on each corner where there were pockets, and it provides a much more reliable place to tie things down than just looping the hooks underneath those pockets. Next, up at the front of the trailer, I put in a lot of things. I have a 12,000 pound Badlands winch, that I mounted to a 2-inch receiver carrier, and then I welded a 2-inch receiver in between the bars of the trailer. So this is removable. I could take the winch off if I don't need it, or I could put it on if I do need it. I also welded on this very large toolbox onto the trailer, and I made a lot of customizations to this toolbox. I welded on the handles, I welded on the lock, and I added a solar panel and a series of grommets, and of course the very large light on the front. So once the box is opened, sorry, sometimes it takes two hands, you'll notice a few things. I have a battery and a switch panel, and I have a couple cases that have ratchet straps and an assortment of other tie downs. So lots of space in here for both the stuff that I have today and stuff I may need in the future. The battery is just a 12-volt automotive battery that I bought from Walmart, and the switch panel came from Amazon. It does have a voltmeter in it, so I could see what the current voltage is, and it also has a couple ports. It has a 5-switch panel. It has a 12-volt cigarette lighter port, and it also has dual USB chargers. So currently I have 2 of these switches hooked up. One of the switches is for the light bar that you're seeing right there. It's very bright. It aims backwards, so it illuminates the trailer and anything I'm trying to bring up onto the trailer. And then the second switch is for another addition at the very front of the trailer, and that addition is an electric trailer jack. So prior to this, I had a manual crank trailer jack that was somewhat broken, and every time I turned the crank would fall off in my hand. I left it there as a backup, but this new one that I got from Amazon, it's great. It's a 10,000 pound, I believe, trailer jack, and it's electric, and it has a light on the front of it and a couple power switches, and it's hooked up to the battery, and all you have to do is press a button to lower it or press another button to raise it, and everything's automatic. So this for me is an ultimate trailer rig. During the month of July, I also did a few cleanup projects around the farm. One thing I wanted to do was move all of these tree trunks that I had cut down and piled in front of the barn doors. I am going to leave one tree trunk in front of the barn door so that it doesn't swing open and closed, and just to keep it safe. But the rest of these I'm bringing in the back of the barn because I'd like to cut them to size and then wedge them under the barn between the concrete floor and some of the beams at the ceiling, just to provide some additional support. Now, the sad thing here is that this is the last time that my loader here that I bought earlier this spring operated. Remember I said that we had several equipment breakdowns? Well, this is one of them. I'm trying to figure out how to fix it. I'm thinking that it's a fuel delivery problem, but more to come on that later. You'll also notice that my tractor is back, but unfortunately that also had to go back to the shop several more times. But the front of the barn is cleaner. It looks a lot better without all those stumps there. So between the removal of the stumps and the trunks and the new lights, things are looking okay. So in the same vein of trying to clean and beautify some of the farm, or at least the area in front of the barn, Megan came over one weekend day and she gave me a hand moving a whole bunch of stuff that had been cut down and just left on the side of the barn, an area that I really need to clean up. One of the things I really wanted to do was try and get these vines off the side of the building. Some of them are like 6 inches around, and they are holding captive this old silo that's falling down on the side of the barn. For safety reasons, I really just need to get all that loose stuff off, the timbers and whatnot, but I just can't get all of these vines off. You know how they say that the highest accident rates happen on farms? Well, there I go. Right down. Slipped right on the mud, slid down the 5-foot hill. Megan's hysterical, laughing, thinks it's a great time. It was funny. I didn't get hurt. But also, speaking of a great time, it's time to check on the bees. And this time Megan bought her own bee suit. We got the smoker going, and we're gonna give it a whirl just to make sure that they're healthy, and I'm going to feed them this time. So the bee activity throughout the summer has been very minimal. They're still there, which is great, but there just hasn't been a lot of progress or activity. So inside the hive, I did put an in-hive feeder. That's that black thing that you see right there. And you put it in there and you fill it up with a sugar water nectar solution, and the bees will just harvest from there instead of having to use all their energy to search elsewhere. So this is a compilation of several different visits to the beehive, but what I'm doing today is removing the feeder from inside the hive because the bees have expanded beyond the 5 frames that I purchased earlier this summer into 3 of the new frames. So they say when the hive is about 80% populated, you should put the super on top, and the super is where the bees store the honey. So we're not quite there yet. By the way, using the smoker is very satisfying. It's fun watching all the bees scurry. But anyway, what I'm doing today is I'm cleaning all of the excess wax off of the top of these, or the shoulders of these frames. And then I'm going to replace the in-hive feeder, which I refilled several times with homemade nectar. And I'm going to put in the 2 additional frames.
I'd like it noted that I'm here in my suit this time.
And yes, we're all very proud of Megan that she is here in her suit and not running away, fleeing, screaming with the bees buzzing around her. She still did make a lot of weird, funny noises, though, as they were flying around. Anyway, I have this great hive tool here that allows you to clip on over the shoulder of the frames, and it easily allows you to pull up the frames, hopefully not quite so violently in the future, and it allows you to inspect them. And as you can see, this is one of the new frames that I put in, and they've filled it up really nicely. So the colony is expanding. They are producing honey. There are bee things going on inside the hive, which is beneficial for their colony. So with all of that happening, it only makes sense that I put in these 2 brand new frames, allow the bees a couple weeks to further build out the colony to fill up these frames, and then, as I've been told, later on toward the fall, or I should say maybe early September, when goldenrod comes out and some of the other bee-friendly plants, the honey production should go into full speed. So I am looking forward to that. I don't yet know if I'm going to harvest any honey this year, or if I'm going to leave it all for the bees to help them through the winter to keep them well fed, or to help them build their colony. But it is novel, I think, that I will have honey, and if I so choose, maybe I can harvest some. We'll see. We'll see how September and October play out and make that determination at that point. I am very curious, though, how the auto-flow beehive is going to work. If it is truly just turn a dial and honey starts flowing. But at the end here, Megan put the lid on and we were ready to go. Now let's fast forward a few weeks and a few work trips, and things have expanded inside the hive. Those new frames that I put in have been filled out, and it's time to put on the super, and that's the second box there that you see me placing. If you remember when we built this, there's a window there that you can look into the hive, and also the access ports to remove the honey. All of this fits nicely together. I bought a second one, and I also bought a third hive, a conventional frame. So we'll see how things go. But that's it for this episode. Lots more to come. I have a lot of work trips, but aside from the work trips, I have a lot of content for videos, and I'm taking a lot of new videos as the weeks go on. A lot of things are happening. More things so far in early fall than have happened the entire summer. So please stay tuned. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.